Welcome to Beyond the Next Chapter. I am your host, Whitney Clark. Buckle up. We're going on a ride this podcast episode. We're talking about a new thriller. It's called Fatal Intrusion, and we're here with two of the authors today. This is set in Southern California. An unlikely duo of heroes is trying to catch a serial killer. That's about the shortest way I can describe the book. There are a lot of twists and turns along the way. It's written by Jeffery Deaver and Isabella Maldonado. He is an international #1 best-selling author who's written more than 40 novels. Some of his books have also gotten the Hollywood treatment, including the CBS show Tracker, which is based on his novel The Never Game, and his book The Bone Collector was a feature starring Denzel Washington and Angelina Jolie. Maldonado is also a best-selling author who has a real-life background in law enforcement before she turned to writing. She also graduated from the FBI National Academy and was the first Latina to become a captain in a police department just outside of Washington, D.C. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
Delighted to be here.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Fatal Intrusion. I gave it sort of the shortest explanation I can give. When you talk to people about this book, how do you describe it?
Whitney, we really appreciate the way you described it, which was to give nothing away, because Isabella and I spent hours and hours on the phone when we first came up with the idea of the book, creating twists and surprises, because our feeling is that readers are brilliant and they want a surprise, but they've read a lot of these sorts of books and they're very smart folks. And so we want to make sure that we can first scare the socks off them, because we've got some kind of weird criminals running around in Southern California, but then also surprise them and trick them. And so that is the way you described it was perfect, because it didn't give anything away, and there's a lot to give away in this book.
There is a lot to give away. Tell me about how you guys met. Mm-hmm. How did you decide now is the time for us to write a book together?
Well, we met back in 2018 at a conference for readers and writers called Murder and Mayhem in Chicago. It's an annual conference, and they have it in different places. And we had such a good time. During the breaks, we were in the green room together with Gillian Flynn, who wrote Gone Girl. And the three of us just started cracking jokes, and we were telling really fun stories, and we amused each other with the idea of at that point, we sort of were talking about what if we all three wrote this book together, and we were joking about how it would feature a baby mafioso. And we just kept cracking jokes. And I knew I liked both of their sense of humor. And then I bumped into Jeff again at another conference in New York City, Thriller Fest. And after that, it was like, I guess the idea was sort of out there, but we talked about it again. And then after that, it just became more and more serious. But we realized that we both write in a very similar style. And that was key.
Mm-hmm. There are two types of crime novels. There are murder mysteries, and your listeners and viewers will know Agatha Christie, for instance, or Sherlock Holmes. And those try to solve the question, what happened in the past? You know, there's a murder, and the detective inspector figures it out. And those are fun. They're intellectual puzzles, and we all love those. But Isabella and I don't write that. We write thrillers. That's the second category. And that asks the question, what is going to happen in the future? Will they find the bomb in time, or will they capture the criminal before he kills again? And we like those because it gives us the chance to create a pressure cooker. We throw the readers into a pressure cooker, turn up the heat as hot as it will go, and jump from chapter to chapter to chapter, so that ideally we want Fatal Intrusion to be read in one sitting if possible. And we've been getting a lot of that. Some people, they're a little embarrassed. They say, well, it took me 2 days to read it. But that's why, because we have this kind of a symbiotic approach toward writing, we could work together so well.
I guess I should be embarrassed because it took me 3 days to read it. But I will say the last half I finished incredibly quickly, like within one day, within a couple of hours.
We forgive you, Whitney.
Okay, thank you.
It's okay. It's a big book.
Yeah. So we talk about the Carmen Sanchez and the other man who is this unlikely duo of heroes. Kind of talk about their relationship, how they meet, and how they're introduced initially in the book.
Well, there's a little bit of a spoiler there, so we can't go into too much about their backgrounds.
They have a past, but we can't talk about that.
Yeah, and it's a complicated past, and we can say that they don't like each other. We can certainly say that, and but yeah, they kind of are. They're thrown together, and I think it's pretty clear early on that Carmen Sanchez is a federal agent. She needs to investigate something, but she's not allowed to, so she has to kind of freelance, and she needs someone who's not associated with any kind of law enforcement, and she realizes that Professor Jacoby Heron owes her a favor, and she calls it in. And it's definitely one of these sort of grudging partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
He's rather dismayed to see her in his teaches. He's a professor at a school sort of like Cal, like University of California at Berkeley. And I'll talk in just a second about what he teaches. But he looks up, and his shoulders slump, and he goes kind of has a dogged expression, and oh no, Carmen's here. What's up? Because he hasn't seen her for a long time, and they do form this unlikely, love-hate bond. But Jake is a very interesting short for Jacoby. That's his nickname, Jake Heron. He's has an interesting career. He's an intrusionist, which don't look it up because I made it up. I created this. We invent a lot of stuff in the book, which is part of the fun of writing fiction. And but he was a former black hat hacker, and for those of your listeners who are not familiar with that, those are the bad guy hackers. They break into things they shouldn't break into. But he only broke into like the servers and email accounts of greedy CEOs and domestic abusers, and he reported them to the police. It was still a crime. He couldn't do it legally, but he did it, and then that's in his past, and now he's gone over to the good side, and he lectures people about the dangers of intrusion to protect themselves. Like, I don't know about you, but on my cell phone yesterday, I got about 25 telemarketer calls. I didn't think they were supposed to call your cell phone, but they did. That's intrusion, and that's the most mild kind. Other intruders are data miners who suck up our information, and, of course, domestic abusers, too, which I referred to earlier. And so he lectures people about that, and suddenly he finds himself involved in a true intrusion case, and that's where he gets together with Carmen and tracks down this serial killer person.
He's kind of like a Robin Hood.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the book, you say at one point, again, this is a spoiler-free zone, that some of the worst intrusions include family members.
Yeah.
And do you believe that to be true in the way you've created in this world?
Oh, I absolutely believe that to be true, because there's a concept of when, and Isabella and I kind of made this up. It's a little bit of philosophy. We'd like to give some depth to the book. But when, let's take a relationship, people come together, they may get married, or they may, form a bond. There's love there, but there's a certain point when that becomes, or can become, often never does, but can become a bit dark. Maybe one spouse is abusive or a little deceptive to the other. Well, that's a form of intrusion. And then Jake points out in a conversation with Carmen, well, there's, you have to kind of stand up for yourself. Don't let that happen. And when you can kind of push back a little bit, then that relationship becomes an alliance, and that's good. Mm-hmm. Two people bonded together. It could be a boss and your or co-workers or friends, and but we don't get too heavy in that kind of stuff. There's a lot of car chases and fun stuff in this book.
When I was reading it, I was reading it like it was an action movie. That's kind of how it read to me as I was going through it. How did you even begin working together on this? I mean, did you come up with an outline? Did you take turns writing? How did that work?
Well, Jeff is what I refer to as a world-class outliner.
Psychotic is another word you can use. But
I outline as well, but he really, he teaches people how to do it. He's like, premier. And so it was, especially writing with someone else, writers often refer to themselves in two ways, plotters and pantsers. So the pantsers are those who write by the seat of their pants. A famous example is Stephen King, who famously says he just starts banging away, Others are meticulous plotters. A famous example is J.K. Rowling, who plotted out all 7 books, and had them in her mind. So there's different examples of extremely successful authors doing it either way. We both like to know where we're going first, And so we did the outline. And the nice thing about doing that, especially when you're co-authoring, is you can work out some of the details ahead of time before you have to throw out 20, 30,000 words that you've written. You can eliminate them right at the early phase before you spend all that time, and you can see some of the plot holes or work on that together. So it did start with an outline.
And did you guys work in person together? Was it one of those like shared Google Docs? I mean, how did...
Well, that's a very good point. And this was Isabella's innovation. We did not work together physically. We had many phone calls, but we both work in Microsoft Word, which is kind of the standard of word processing. I mean, I grew up with Word Perfect, which is a wonderful word processing program. I don't think not with us any longer. But then I moved over to Word, and there is a concept of it's not necessarily unique to Word, but it's Microsoft OneDrive, and that's in the cloud somewhere. And we, Isabella loaded the document up to OneDrive. I had access to it, and so we could work on the book at the same time, with the exception we tried writing the same sentence together at the same time. That didn't work. In fact, I think we brought all of Microsoft service around the world to a crashing halt together. Well, probably
so
not.
That
that
was you guys.
Probably
Okay.
not that.
Yeah, that was
serious.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But aside from that, we could do, and we would see the cursor with our little initials on it, and we could say, well, let's change this to that, and then we had many comments. I'm illustrating now, so those who are watching this, on the right-hand side of the document, comments pop up, and you can write something and refer to something you'd written earlier, something that you want to come later, and we worked through those, and it was a very efficient way to work.
And how long? I'm always interested in how long it takes, like from when you guys started working on the outline to when you were done writing. How long of a process is that for you both?
I never really quantified it that way,
didn't
but I would
either.
guess maybe 4 or 5 months, probably.
Several months.
Yeah, we work very quickly. We are professional writers. I don't mean that it sounds like I'm being a little, less than humble that way, but we are professional writers. We make money writing by definition. And we also, when I do teach my course, I tell my students, you write your story or your book, and out it goes. And if you hook one person with the love of the characters you've created, that's it. You are responsible to them. It may be one reader, it could be 100,000, but you make sure you deliver to them with some regularity and with the quality they expect. And we both feel that way about all of our readers. So we wanted to make sure we got a book into the hands of a quality book into the hands of the readers, our readers right away. They expect that. And so we worked hard. I mean, 10-hour days?
Yeah,
Right?
it was a lot of hard work. And that is it. We both, it was all in service of the reader, in service of the story. It's not about, we're not writing just to amuse ourselves.
Oh, talk about the zone.
We want to do that. Yes, the zone. So what we're talking about regarding that, and this is really important for anyone who wants to co-author anything, we had to declare an ego-free zone. And it is really important, because otherwise, if you're like, I'm married to this concept and I can't get rid of it, or, well, I know more than the other one does and whatever, no, that's never going to work. And it truly was egalitarian, and we edited each other relentlessly. And I think it really did work well, because the story it's really smooth, and it does flow. And we ended up speaking with one voice that way, because, I wrote originally in the initial drafts, I wrote more of the Carmen Sanchez chapters. Jeff wrote more of the Jake Herron chapters. But we both wrote chapters in that other point of view, and we both wrote the bad guy and, the other things. So, and then when we edited, it all smoothed out.
And in fact, readers have not been able to tell who wrote what. And in fact, there really is no concept of who wrote what, because we wrote everything. I say it's 50-50, 100% 50-50, which may or may not make sense mathematically, but I'm a writer. I know nothing about mathematics.
Who cares about numbers when you have to write?
But,
I will say I would have never been able to tell who wrote what, which is why I was so fascinated with how you were able to do it together. Were there any concepts or things you guys had to leave on the cutting room floor that you had to say, okay, I guess I'll let this idea die?
For instance, I love my twists and turns. And if you know books like The Bone Collector and the Coulter Shaw books and so forth, there are three or four surprise endings, which we put into Fatal Intrusion. Sometimes I try for 6 percentage, and it just doesn't work. It's like the bad horror movie where, oh my God, Freddy Krueger comes back from the dead in the last 5 minutes. We've seen that all before. And it pushes the credibility, and the readers say, oh, give me a break, or the viewers say, give me a break. I don't want readers to say. And I had a twist like that, and Isabella, very, very kindly and judiciously said, I'm not sure this detracts a bit from the drama that we built up. And she was absolutely right.
Yeah,
and I took something out for you. We
He
don't have to go
did.
into that, but I took some. I
He did.
suggested we might want to go elsewhere.
We had to reel each other in sometimes, But
Totally.
that it serves the whole plot again, and it makes it. Another thing too about the cutting room floor was we did have another subplot about Jake Herron and his family. And we realized there was just no room in the book for that. So we saved it for book 2, which we are writing right now.
Oh.
Yes. The sequel, it's called The Grief Artist.
Okay.
And it's coming out next September, and
Wow.
it's already up for pre-order.
Wow.
Yeah.
You
can
guys
actually
do work quickly.
We do.
Well, we
do.
you understand we do have to write it first,
Yeah.
but you can still order it now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's
Cool.
just available for pre-order. It's not finished, but
And before you guys started this, did you go into this knowing there was going to be more than one, and this was going to be a series?
Yeah, we the contract we have with the wonderful publisher Thomas and Mercer was for 2 books, and also we've learned, because Isabella writes series, I write series. People love the characters. We're very plot-driven authors, and these are plots that I know readers enjoy. It's a roller coaster, but people love characters. And I remember growing up reading. I read when I was a kid. I read the James Bond books and the Tolkien books, and I loved the stories. Who doesn't love adventure? But we love the characters, and so we want to make sure that readers fell in love with Jake and Carmen, and we're going to keep giving them Jake and Heron for as long as they want. I'll repeat it again: Jake and Heron, Jake and Carmen. Yes.
So this book has spiders in it. We'll say that. Do you guys? And that's like a common fear. Like people are afraid of spiders. They're afraid of snakes. Is there anything you guys are afraid of in real life? Like, would you shriek if you saw a spider, or like what are your real
Bad
life fears?
reviews.
yeah.
No, I joke. Go ahead, Isabella. What do you-
Actually, well, I am kind of creeped out by spiders big time, and they really do bother me badly. And it was funny because there was one point in the book where I'm describing Carmen's thoughts about spiders, and they are my thoughts. I literally was just writing how I feel about them, And but the killer, he's kind of enamored of them. And Jeff actually is the one. He did so much research on spiders. I'm glad it was you, because I don't want to know that much, but it's fascinating. And
I think if your followers who read the book, and we hope there are a number. We know you're going to like it. You'll come away with a bit of, believe it or not, affection for spiders, because I kind of humanize them in a way. And just for the record, Isabella and I do not endanger children. We don't endanger animals, and not a single spider was killed in the writing of this
That's right.
story. But you'll learn fascinating things. There's a species of spider that after the mother spider gives birth to, lays the eggs, or however the spider. I didn't get into those details. Didn't get into those details. But the father then takes over and raises them. I found that very interesting, and little facts like that. No, there's not a lot of that in the book.
No.
But we also put that in because we wanted to give some resonance to the villain, who is obsessed with spiders for reasons that we don't really want to reveal, and it kind of, believe it or not, humanizes him, because we want the bad guy to be a human character too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely got that vibe for sure. I know more about like brown recluse.
Yes,
think
I know.
that was
Yes.
probably the
That's
creepiest
scary.
part to me
Oh,
was
yeah.
how like the brown recluse
Yeah.
spiders
Yeah.
work and how they can stay hidden.
Yeah.
A huge part of this story is about Carmen is a Homeland Security investigator, and it's mentioned in the book that not many people know much about that department. I mean, everybody kind of knows what the FBI is. You have a background in law enforcement. What was that like, your career in law enforcement and going through the FBI training?
Yeah. Well, I I like to say I wore a gun and badge for 22 years. So I started off at the Fairfax County Police Department, which is inside the Beltway in the suburbs of D.C. So a lot of the stuff going on in the nation's capital, you end up getting involved just because so many government officials are there and government agencies and stuff. So there was a lot of that, and I enjoyed my time on starting off like as a patrol officer, worked my way up through the ranks. I ended as a captain, and my last position was commander of special investigations and forensics. While I was there, I was a hostage negotiator, and I was a precinct commander, and I was also the spokesperson. I mean, I did a lot of different things on the department, and I enjoyed that a lot. One of the things I was also able and fortunate to do was I was selected to attend the FBI National Academy, and that's for upper-level executive law enforcement. You go there in Quantico, and you stay on campus at Quantico for 3 months, and you learn all kinds of things, and you work together with other executives, and it's a really great experience. And I was able to use all that background to inform my writing. And I know a lot of people write about female law enforcement. It's also very popular in television and movies to see female law enforcement, but very few write from a place of experience of what it's like to be a female in law enforcement. And so I thought, this is something I can contribute to the genre.
Do you see a lot of yourself in Carmen Sanchez?
I guess I would say she is not me, but I kind of know where she lives. I understand her.
Mm-hmm. Why was it important for you guys to focus on Homeland Security as opposed to the many other departments and law enforcement agencies you could have chosen from?
Well, one thing about Homeland Security Investigations, which is an organization that I was completely unfamiliar with, and you may have had a slight knowledge of it, but we did some research into that. Isabella did most of the research. This is an amazing organization. Over 10,000 employees and agents around the world in all sorts of locations. I mean, there's an office in, it's like an allied office in Moscow, and in the Far East, throughout the South Asian Peninsula, throughout South America, and that gave us an opportunity to, possibly take Jake and Carmen to different locations, exotic locations, which maybe in the future we haven't quite planned that out yet, but that's a possibility. And the remit of Homeland Security Investigations is huge. It involves all kinds of crimes. It involves human trafficking, sex trafficking, drugs, financial crimes, and so forth, labor union malfeasance and things like that. So we have a broad palette to work with. And then, of course, the big T, terrorism, mm-hmm. Which is a constant nowadays, and one always has to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite part of working in that field in law enforcement?
Probably the most interesting time that I had was when I was in that position, and at that time I was the spokesperson when the Beltway sniper case occurred. And so it was a high-stress time and very difficult, but I really enjoyed the challenge of dealing with actually the media, the public, and the detectives, and the case, and the investigation, and sort of channeling the information. And I just found that so interesting because I had to be really up on what's going on in the investigation, but also really dealing with, what are we allowed to tell the public and everything. It was the most challenging, but also the most exciting and interesting time.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about Homeland Security in this book, but you talk about local police and local sheriff's departments. Mm-hmm. Why was it important to include all of those sort of players who can play a role in some of these investigations?
Well, again, speaking from a non-law enforcement person, but I have written many crime books, and I worked with the FBI, the CIA, the NRO, the NRA, and actually some foreign intelligence folks as well in Italy and in the UK. And it's always the concept, whether it's officially a task force or not, it's always a group effort because if there's a shooting in say a small town, depending on the circumstances, the FBI could be involved if there's a state border, a state line crossed. If there's a terrorist possible hook, the FBI might be involved. Department of Homeland Security might be involved. And but also, speaking from our point of view, we want to stir that pot I was talking about earlier, the pressure cooker, as much as we can, so to get more law enforcers involved and to present not only the crime that we're trying to solve, but sometimes the politics, which Isabella can speak to much better than I can. I mean, I worked for Wall Street law firm, so I can talk about politics too. And I don't mean Washington politics, I mean business, corporate politics. There's a lot of nefarious stuff that goes on there. But when you introduce other elements, you may have like a young rookie who's maybe not quite so competent but wants to learn, and then maybe there's the chief of a local police department who's kind of lazy, doesn't want to get involved, and there's corruption. It certainly does happen. So we wanted to just stir the pot.
You talk sort of in the book about misinformation and things that can spread online. That's kind of more towards the end, and AI and different things. How have you, as a longtime crime writer, as an author, also someone that worked in law enforcement, how have you seen that change in novels over the years? Because we're talking about things in some of these books that weren't in the picture 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, this book is very cutting edge tech-wise. I don't want to intimidate people who are not tech savvy. I mean, everything is explained, but it is very cutting edge and sort of up to the minute. And law enforcement has had to change because of technology. The way that we investigate things and handle things has changed. And in addition to that, the way that criminals commit crimes has also changed. But one of the things we wanted to do, and I think we both felt like we wanted to have it be more than just, a cat and mouse chase. Although that's totally there, we wanted more to it. And one of the things that we wanted to kind of talk about was what's going on online and how people are becoming influenced a lot by what they see and what they do. And I'm not sure how far to go with that. We have to be careful.
We do have to be a bit careful. But I guess what we talked about when we were coming up with the general concept for the book is we have several, I would call them strains going, subplots, you might say. And one is, of course, the core of the story in which Carmen and Jake are after this nefarious apparent serial killer, and I'll use that adjective, important, decidedly, but also carefully, because that suggests other things may happen. So he certainly is a serial killer, but there may be other things going on. So that's the crime, and they pursue this guy, then he pursues them, and that's the fun cat and mouse stuff. Then there's also what I call, with affection, the soap opera stuff, and that is in this book, Carmen's relationship with her estranged younger sister, and that tugs at the heart, and that's a kind of a car chase too, emotionally. And then there's the broader social issue, and that has to do with the, I guess I would say, our humans' response to the way the computer world is going right now. And I can't say more than that, but that too is a roller coaster.
Did you guys have to learn a lot about coding?
Jeff knows a lot.
I do code.
Okay.
I do code
you
some.
do?
So
Okay.
I do. Yeah, I've written. And I don't really have a background in it, but I've written about 5 thrillers that are deep into the internet world. And our job is to scare the socks off people. Well, I've had that as my goal for a long time. And part of that is that you have to look at what are the current aspects of society that touch everyone's life. And 100 years ago, would that be like the telephone, the telegraph, mass transportation? Would you want to sabotage a train? Suddenly everybody's terrified of trains. Well, now computers affect everybody's life, and as long as we can scare the heck out of them by writing about computers, we're going to do it.
Is it hard to come up with ways to scare people and surprise people?
Well, especially surprise, only because, and in a way, it's kind of funny because it's not fair in a certain sense. Again, in law enforcement, in several of the books that I've read, and this one is no different. There can be someone who's reading it and be like, oh no, you could have told that this wasn't really what was going on, that there was something else, and why did the police not realize that? I can tell you from having done the job, it's not usually this complicated thing. In law, it's pretty straightforward. And so when I have my police characters act a certain way or detectives reach a certain conclusion through deductive reasoning, it is fair and it's what they do, but readers have read hundreds and hundreds of these plots and they've seen hundreds of movies and TV shows, so they're always thinking, oh, it's 16 layers deep and it's something else and whatever, but in real life, that really isn't how it goes. So that's tricky.
And the curse of crime writers that we've had to deal with recently, the cell phone, because with the introduction of the cell phone, most crime books would be over with in chapter 3 because the victim calls 911 from the cell phone, or they can communicate immediately. And it was a lot easier in the 50s when you had to find a payphone, and the killer could still get to you at that point. But but you work around that, and it's every generation of crime writers had his and her challenges.
And we challenge ourselves to come up with something different and fresh. And, an example of that is, if you want to avoid that, no having the battery run out of the cell phone. That's been done to death. And it's too much of a coincidence and too convenient that it happens just at that moment. It's like a crutch almost. So we're like, nope, we've got to come up with another reason why the phone won't work. And it forces us to be very creative and clever, and with other things too. And that's another reason of having Carmen Sanchez working with the Department of Homeland Security's Homeland Security investigation, because it's something different and fresh, and people are not familiar with it.
Yeah. Definitely. And also, too, when was the last time your phones just ran out of battery?
Exactly.
My phone is constantly plugged in. These days, it's like there's chargers everywhere. Your
Exactly.
I tell my students in my writing courses that it's a long course and there are many technical things we talk about, but one of the most important things is the standard that they have when they come up with the idea and when they execute the book. And it's this very complicated literary concept that goes back thousands of years. It's called the gimme a break factor. And if the reader reads something like the cell phone coincidentally going out at the wrong moment, and they think, gimme a break, we've done something wrong. And the same thing with like excessive violence. We don't want gore in the books. We want suspense. And that's why this book is not gory. We don't really see any terrible crime happen. There's death.
It happens off stage.
Yeah.
There's definitely crime, and but it does. It happens off stage. You're not like treated to a front row seat of every little
No, and there's just enough to kind of like have you imagine like, oh my goodness. I'm thinking of one particular scene, which I won't give anything away, but there's just enough to keep you like interested and but it's not too over the top.
A woman came to me after a book signing, and she said, well, Jeff, I liked your book, but that one scene, it was so gruesome. I really hated it. I almost stopped at that point, and I said, "What scene was that?" And she said, "Well, that guy was killed. The messenger was killed." And I said, could we take a look at that again? Because we didn't see the messenger killed. We found Amelia Sachs. It was a Lincoln Rhyme book. She found the body. Yeah. But we didn't see it killed. And she said, you know what, that was in my imagination. So
yeah. Is it interesting to hear from readers after the fact and how they imagine things a certain way? Do you get that a lot from readers?
Yeah, and it's always fun. I enjoy it, and I like it too when they tell me how much they were convinced that this was going on and this was the bad guy and this was the reason behind it, and they were totally fooled, and they love it. They always, but you have to play fair with them. So, there can't be, in the last chapter, somebody that we've never seen or heard of before turns out to be the bad guy doing everything. You have to play fair and give them all the clues, and they love it, and it has to be done very carefully. It's like walking a tightrope, where the correct feeling should be, I didn't see it coming, but I should have. That's what you want.
Yeah, that takes a lot, and that's where the outlining really helps, because you can put in, we outline each, say it's not like Sister Mary Elizabeth's outline, Roman numeral 1 and A, it's just bullet point. But, we think, okay, let's call it, those basically become the chapters. So let's say we're working on chapter 5. We know what the end is. Say chapter 5 is a good place to put that clue in, then we put it in and make sure it does double duty. Make sure it's like a reader sees it, but then we explain it away in some other fashion, so it's in their mind, and then they come to the end and they say, I should have seen that. Should have seen that coming.
Who are your favorite authors? Like, do you guys like to read in your free time, the free time you do have? Do you like to read crime novels as well, or do you branch out into different genres?
Well, I myself cannot, actually, Isabel and I have not really talked about this too much, but I cannot read other crime fiction. Well, first of all, we are working a lot. You know,
right.
We're doing not only the Thomas and Mercer book, but I publish with Putnam as well. I do the Coulter Shaw books. I continue to do those, and I write novellas for Amazon Original Stories. So it's a pretty booked day. But the reason, and you don't get into this business if you don't love to read.
Yeah.
That goes way back. But I have to be very careful because I absorb things. I once wrote a scene. I love John le Carré, the British writer who passed away a few years ago, the spy writer. And I was writing a Lincoln Rhyme book. And this is an exaggeration, but it's sort of what happened. And there's a New York City policeman running down the street saying, blimey, stop that bloke. Because I got the Britishness in my mind.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite that obvious, but I thought, I can't read somebody else while I'm writing. So, but I mean, who did I read? I mentioned Ian Fleming, James Bond, Lord of the Rings, Dashiell Hammett. I loved the John D. MacDonald, Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, storytellers. Anybody who told a good story. I like literary fiction. Well, Saul Bellow. I like. Gabriel Marquez, Love in the Time of Cholera, one of the best love stories ever written. I like all that writing, but it's got to be a story. I don't like experimental kind of stuff.
Yeah, and for me, actually, I have the same problem in that I can't read fiction, especially crime fiction, while I am actively in the throes of writing my book, which is most of the time. So I don't get to read as much of that as I used to before I was writing all the time. But I read a lot of nonfiction instead, and I do enjoy quite a bit of that. And I read on a wide variety of subjects, which is, I think, really good because it gives you this kind of more worldly view. And then it's surprising how often all these various subjects will suddenly come into play. And when you're writing a thriller, it's like, oh yeah, I remember reading about this that happens over in this culture when they do that ceremony or whatever. That can actually inform my book, or about this medical thing, or this mindset issue or whatever it is. It's interesting how it can all come into play. So unfortunately, I have to read I can't read as much of the crime fiction as I would like to.
I get it, though, because if I'm working on a story, like a news story, I don't like to read the other station stories about the same topic until after I'm done, because I don't want to you get their story in your head, and then you're right, it comes out in your own writing, and you're like, wait, that was not an original thought. That was something I've already read. So
exactly.
I totally understand that. Yeah. How did you transition from law enforcement to writing?
Well, I always knew I wanted to write from the time I was very, very young. But I felt like I really didn't have much to say as like a kid. So, but after a full career in law enforcement, I came back to it because it's like, okay, now I have things to say. And after I retired, I spent 5 years studying the art and craft of writing.
Wow.
I read probably no exaggeration, over 100 books on the art and craft of writing. I attended writers' conferences and learned from people like Jeff, who it wasn't actually Jeff's class, but there were many people. You go to like the bestsellers, the ones who are really at the top of their game, and you take notes and you learn from what they have to give and stuff. And then after 5 years of that, and during that time, I got 3 short stories published. So from there, I learned about the process of being published and being edited. And I learned about how I wanted to write, which, first person, third person, all that. I sort of zeroed in on those things. And then when I got that nailed down, I went ahead and tackled my first full-length novel. And I was very lucky and blessed. That novel garnered me a 3-book deal right out of the chute. Wow. So I was really, really lucky with that.
Yeah. What is it like for you to teach the art of writing?
I love it. Although I will warn all your listeners and viewers that I'm rather opinionated, but I have to because I approach writing, as you probably gather, as a job, as a profession. One of the things I kind of joke about with my students is that when was the last time you went into CVS or Rite Aid or a drugstore and looked at the shelf and saw that there was no toothpaste there, and you asked what happened, and the clerk said, "Oh well, maybe you didn't hear, but Procter & Gamble was not moved by the muse to create toothpaste this month, and so the shelves are empty." And that doesn't happen because Procter & Gamble is a manufacturing company, and you are a manufacturing company, and you manufacture a wonderful creative product, but it's something that you have to get into the hands of the marketplace. And so I approach writing from a plotting point of view. I outline first, tell my students they have to do that. And so what I do is it's a 4-hour lecture. We don't do workshops. I don't want to see what I was going to say young people, but that's not true. It's people who are of all ages. I don't care what they've written. I don't want to see samples. I just tell them this right up front. You may ignore everything I tell you. You may embrace everything I tell you, and you'll probably be somewhere in between. But I'm not trying to tell you to do anything. This is the Jeff at this point talking to the Jeff when he started. Well, I was 12 years old when I started writing, but let's say when I was more serious about it in my early 30s, and saying, this is what has worked for me. This is what I have developed over the years, and take what you want from it. And people have come to me and said they've used that and gotten published, and it's very fulfilling, because my approach is that, I'd say to the class, hey, raise your hand. Have you ever read a book that should not have been written? And we all have. We can't afford to do that. We have to give readers who spend their money, hard-earned money, and more important, that spend their time with books. We have to honor that and give them something worthy of that money and time. And that it's not hard to do. It's not impossible. But you just have to think about it. You have to be diligent about it. You have to work hard. There's a neurosurgeon, and she wakes up and she thinks, I don't really feel like being a neurosurgeon today. But she is a neurosurgeon. She does the best job she can possibly be. We have to be like that.
Mm-hmm. Since starting this podcast, I've learned so much about the publishing world and the writing world, and I just have such a respect for authors who are able to even get a book published. I mean, that is just a feat in and of itself. So it's just been so incredible to kind of learn about how it works and how the publishing world works. And I'm sure we could do an entire podcast on that just specifically. Is there anything else you guys want readers to know about Fatal Intrusion?
I guess to keep an open mind when you're reading it, and realize that nothing is as it seems.
If you like roller coasters and misdirection, magic shows, illusion, you will love Fatal Intrusion.
Great, thank you guys so much. I really loved it. As a someone who reads a lot of thrillers, it's hard to be surprised these days, but I found this surprising in so many different ways. So I really enjoyed it, and I hope others will enjoy it too. So thank you both so much.
Well, thank you.